Today, I'm going to be talking about this thing. Now, some of you may be wondering what this thing is. You may have to think outside the box for this one. It is not a stool. It is not a trash can. No, it's a musical instrument called a cajon. Today, I'm going to talk about the cajon's history, its structure, and how you can play it. The word cajon is Spanish for crate or drawer. It was invented by slaves in Peru and Cuba several centuries ago. These slaves had been kidnapped from their homes in Africa. They wanted to make their traditional music but couldn't because they didn't have access to their native instruments. So these slaves decided to improvise. They would gather leftover crates and boxes and hit and slap them, creating makeshift drums. And thus, the cajon was born. When slavery was abolished, the cajon's popularity grew and grew. And in the 1970s, after Spanish guitarist Paco de Lucia introduced the cajon into flamenco music, the cajon became even more popular. Today, you'll hear the cajon in many music genres, including folk, jazz, blues, and rock. New kinds of cajons have even surfaced. The Peruvian cajon, the Cuban cajon, and the flamenco cajon are only a few of the many cajons you may find today. The cajon has become a portable and simple-to-learn instrument that can be used to replace a drum kit. It is more suitable for smaller, more intimate sets due to its size and softer sound. My family got this cajon to help lead worship music at our church. I began to play around with it, and now I regularly play it as I help out with another ministry. Now, instead of thinking outside the box, let's think inside the box and talk about the anatomy of a cajon. Just like its ancestors, the cajons of today are primarily made out of wood. Cajon designers have used materials like mahogany, oak, birch, and beech wood. You'll even see cajons made out of plastic and fiberglass. This cajon is made from oak. But aside from materials, most cajons are generally similar to each other. They are rectangular in shape, have rubber feet, and a sound hole. Now, if you look closely, there's been a separate thin board that has been screwed onto the front of the box. This board is called the tapa. It has been loosely screwed on so that you can strike it, making a distinct slap sound. Now, this cajon is a flamenco cajon, which means that this cajon has built-in snare wires. Let me show them to you. Look inside the hole. Do you see 4 gray vertical lines on the wall opposite this hole? Those are the snare wires. They give the cajon a rattle or hiss, similar to the sound of a snare drum. Not all cajons have these snare wires built into them, though. The Peruvian cajon and the Cuban cajon do not have built-in snare wires. The flamenco cajon does. Now, let's see how to produce sounds with this instrument. When you play the cajon, you sit on it like this. It is good to maintain good posture while playing so you don't strain your back. And if you need to, you can tilt the cajon back like this. This helps me in reaching different parts of the tapa and allows sound to emanate from the bottom, making the cajon resonate more. There are 2 basic sounds you can make with this instrument, and the first is the bass tone. This sound is nice and deep, and is comparable to a drum kit's bass drum sound. A lot of people like to use the flat of their hand to make this sound. I prefer to cup my hand slightly, and in this position, use the tips of my fingers to hit the tapa. A lot of people mistakenly think that the best place to make this sound is by hitting in the middle of the tapa, when actually the best place to make this sound is by hitting between the top and the middle, right here. This spot is called the cajon's sweet spot, and it is different in cajons of different sizes and shapes. But in cajons with this size and shape, you'll find the sweet spot right here. And that is the bass tone. The other sound you can make with this instrument is the high tone or slap tone, which is supposed to resemble a snare drum. And to make this sound, I like to hit at the top corners of the tapa. Now let's look at the striking surface of our hands. As you can see, our fingers are divided into 3 segments: our finger pads or tips, our middle segments, and our bottom segments. When making this sound, the high tone, it is best to hit the tapa with our finger pads and our middle segments. And depending on where you hit on the tapa, the slap tone also changes in tone. It will be higher at the corners and deeper towards the middle. And that is the high tone, or slap tone. And in some cases, you will also want to tweak the sounds in your cajon, and you can do this by adjusting certain screws. On this cajon, if I wanted to make the high tone or slap tone have a more crisp slapping sound, then I would adjust these screws on the top of the tapa with a screwdriver. If I wanted to make the snare sound more obvious, then I would adjust these screws on the bottom of the cajon with an Allen wrench. But for the sake of time, I'll leave the cajon as it is. So now I've told you about the history of a cajon, the anatomy of a cajon, and how you can play it. To conclude, I'd like to demonstrate how I play the cajon with a song composed by yours truly. Feel free to groove along.